I stepped into my husband's car and found a tube of lubricant in the glove compartment. I said nothing. I simply replaced it with industrial glue. And what happened afterward forced the neighbors to call the fire department. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my revenge story from. I want to know how far it has traveled. I sat at the kitchen table, watching Richard, my husband, as he came home after dinner with business partners. He walked in looking tired, tossed his coat onto the sofa, loosened his tie, and collapsed onto the bed without even showering. Within minutes, his snores filled the room. I quietly cleaned up the mess he had left in the living room: coat, wallet, phone, his old laptop. The phone screen was still glowing, showing a new email. I frowned. Richard had never used email. He always said, "Jennifer, this tech stuff is too much of a hassle. I'd rather just call." Yet here was a strange email. Out of curiosity, I opened it. The message was short, just a few words. "You were amazing tonight, Daddy," followed by a red heart. I froze, as if someone had slapped me across the face. Daddy? Who would call him that with such intimacy? I scrolled down, looking for more clues, but there was nothing, just a strange email address full of random characters. A chill ran down my spine. I looked upstairs where Richard shifted in his sleep, his heavy snore echoing. Panicked, I quickly placed the phone back, my heart pounding like a thief caught red-handed. I kept cleaning, gathering dirty clothes to throw in the wash. When I checked the pockets of his pants, I found a folded slip of paper. It was a receipt from an upscale restaurant in Chicago. My eyes narrowed. Chicago. He had told me that night he was meeting clients in Milwaukee, but the receipt clearly listed dinner for two, an expensive bottle of wine, steak, and pasta. I tried to remember the last time Richard had taken me to such a place. Maybe 10 years ago, when I opened my first bakery. Who had he been dining with in Chicago while lying to me about Milwaukee? I snapped photos of the receipt and that email. I didn't want to believe it, but 40 years as a wife had taught me to trust my instincts, and they were never wrong. Something was happening, and I needed to know the truth. I stepped into the garage. Richard's old car was still warm, the smell of gasoline lingering in the air. I opened the door, turned on my flashlight, and searched every corner of the driver's seat. Nothing unusual, just a few loose coins and an empty water bottle. But when I reached into the glove compartment on the passenger side, my hand brushed against something slick and plastic. I pulled it out, and my heart nearly stopped. A half-used tube of lubricant, its cap still sticky. I froze in the dark garage, staring at it like a filthy secret. Richard and I hadn't been intimate in years. He always said he was too tired, that age had taken away his desire. So what was this for? I was stunned, but I forced myself to stay calm. I put it back exactly where it had been, wiped my hands with a tissue, afraid it might leave a trace. I kept searching carefully. Under the back seat, I found several crumpled tissues soaked with a cloying perfume, too sweet, nothing like a man's cologne, and certainly not the soft rose scent I wore. This was something bold, taunting. I photographed everything: the tube of lubricant, the tissues, even noting the smell in my mind. Closing the car, I walked back inside. At the kitchen table, my hands shook as I picked up Richard's phone again. By then, I was almost certain he was cheating. I scrolled through his messages, but they were all about work, cold, lifeless. His inbox was empty, except for that one email. I checked his sent folder, his drafts. Nothing. Too clean. Suspiciously clean. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through. The curtains, I was already awake. I stood in the kitchen, busy making a simple breakfast: 2 fried eggs, slices of toast, and a cup of strong black coffee Richard preferred. I hadn't slept at all. The images of the tube, the receipt, the email haunted me. Richard came down looking exhausted, his hair messy, eyes half closed. He sat, picked up the coffee, took one sip, and set it down. "I have an important meeting today," he rasped, avoiding my eyes. "Might be home late." I forced a smile, though what I wanted to ask was, "Meeting where? With who? Chicago again?" Instead, I said softly, "All right. Drive safe." He patted my shoulder like always and walked out. The door shut, leaving the kitchen silent and my suspicions heavier than ever. I washed the dishes, but my mind was tangled. I couldn't just keep imagining. I needed the truth, concrete proof. I pulled out my phone and searched for a name Rosa, my old friend, had once given me. Years ago, when I first opened my bakery, Rosa had said, "Jennifer, if you ever need to know something, call Peterson. He's a private investigator, discreet, reliable." I never thought I would need him, but now I had no other choice. I dialed Rosa, my voice trembling. "Rosa, could you connect me with Mr. Peterson? I need him." She was silent for a few seconds. "Jennifer, what happened? Did Richard?" I cut her off. "I just need the truth. Please help me." Rosa agreed without hesitation. Within an hour, I received a text from Peterson, arranging to meet me at a small cafe downtown at noon. "Mrs. Jennifer, don't worry. I'll help you," he wrote. Short, but enough to ease me slightly. At noon, I walked into the cafe. It was a quiet place with worn wooden tables and the smell of roasted beans hanging in the air. I chose a corner booth. Peterson arrived, a stocky, middle-aged man in a light blue shirt. His eyes were sharp, piercing. I handed him a USB stick with photos of the email, the receipt, the tube, the tissues. "This is all I have," I said, my voice shaky. "I'm not certain, but I think my husband is cheating." Peterson nodded, flipping through the images, jotting notes in a small notebook. "Mrs. Jennifer, I understand. I'll start surveillance this afternoon. Don't worry, I'll keep you updated." I nodded, trying not to cry. "Thank you. I just need to know whatever the truth is." He looked at me kindly. "I'll do my best. Just act normal around him. Don't let him suspect." I left the cafe, walking through the crowd, feeling lonelier than ever. 40 years of marriage, and now I had to hire someone to follow my own husband. That evening, while I was at the bakery checking delivery logs, my phone buzzed. A message from Peterson. My heart pounded as I opened it. A photo. Richard, in his familiar light blue shirt, walking into an upscale restaurant, holding a woman's hand. I zoomed in and felt my chest collapse. It was Ashley Thompson, my daughter-in-law. She wore a tight black dress, her makeup heavy, lips red, hair flowing. They didn't look like father-in-law and daughter-in-law. They looked like lovers. I sank into a chair, trembling, staring at the screen. Ashley, how could this be? At family dinners, she and Richard had always acted distant, barely speaking. Peterson sent more photos. In one, they sat at a private table with candles and flowers. Ashley leaned toward Richard, laughing, while he lifted her glass in a toast, his eyes gentle. I stared at that look. It was one I hadn't seen in decades, not even when I was young, a girl in Boston with long hair and a bright smile. Early the next morning, Peterson sent me a video. With shaking hands, I pressed play. In it, Ashley leaned close, whispering into Richard's ear, making him laugh out loud. Her voice was sweet, her eyes sparkling in the candlelight. Then they stood, Richard opening the car door for her, as if she were his date. I replayed it over and over, each time like another knife to my heart. Ashley, the daughter-in-law I had treated like my own child, taught to make my family's flan recipe, and Richard, the man I'd trusted for 40 years. What were they doing behind my back, behind David's back? I saved everything, photos, videos, notes on an external drive, carefully labeling the dates and places. My hands moved like a machine, but my mind was chaos. I didn't want to believe. I couldn't. But the proof was undeniable. I sat in my bakery, surrounded by trays of sweet pastries, my heart in ruins. I remembered the early days, when Richard helped me carry sacks of flour, when we laughed in our tiny kitchen. Now those memories felt like they belonged to someone else. The next morning, I stood in the bakery's kitchen with a delivery order for a large hotel. The smell of flour and vanilla, once comforting, felt empty. I had just signed a delivery slip when my phone buzzed in my apron pocket. A text from Peterson. "Mrs. Jennifer, more proof." My stomach knotted as I opened it. A string of photos appeared. The first showed Richard in his gray shirt, leaving a law office near the downtown square. Beside him, Ashley wore a beige business dress, her hair tied in a ponytail, oversized dark glasses covering most of her face. They walked close, too close. Not like father-in-law and daughter-in-law, but like a couple. In the next photo, they stood outside a 4-star hotel in Chicago, the glass doors shining, the sign gilded. I zoomed in, searching for some way to deny it. But there was nothing. They looked too natural, too comfortable together. Then a short video Peterson had taken arrived. I hit play, and my heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. From a distance, but clear enough, Richard and Ashley stood on the 3rd-floor balcony of the hotel. He had his arm around her waist. She rested her head on his shoulder, her long hair blowing in the breeze. Then suddenly, like a knife through me, I saw them kiss. Quick, unhidden. A kiss short but enough to destroy the last shred of hope. I replayed the video frame by frame, each one cutting deeper. The curtains parted, and Ashley rushed into his arms, glowing with the joy of a woman in love. I collapsed into a chair, gripping the edge of the table to keep from falling. Peterson's message followed. They booked the room that afternoon. Looks like they'll be staying overnight. I read it again and again, my throat tightening. Just hours earlier, Richard had texted me, "Jennifer, I won't be home tonight. Meeting a potential international partner. Go to bed early." Sweet, caring words, words he had used for years. But now I knew the truth. There was no partner, no meeting, only a carefully crafted lie. He wasn't at work, he was in a 4-star hotel with our daughter-in-law. I saved each photo, each video onto my hard drive. Every time I clicked save, I checked again, desperate to confirm I wasn't dreaming. In the video, Richard's eyes were soft as he looked at Ashley. The way he brushed her hair reminded me of more than 30 years ago, when he used to do that to me. Back when we were young, and I believed love was forever. Now all I saw was betrayal, raw and merciless. I remembered family gatherings, everyone seated around the table. Ashley always kept her distance from Richard, sometimes even glaring at him with disdain. When Richard joked, David would tease, "Mom, I don't think Ashley can stand Dad. She avoids him like the plague." And I believed it. I thought they didn't get along, that she was just trying to blend into the family. But now I saw the truth, it had all been an act. They fooled me, Fooled David, fooled everyone. I felt like the biggest fool of all. A blind wife, deceived by both her husband and her daughter-in-law. Right there, in plain sight, on a hotel balcony, while the world outside went on as if nothing had happened. But Peterson had captured the perfect moment, like a silent hunter. I texted back, "Thank you. Please keep watching. I need to know everything." He replied briefly, "I will. Stay calm." That night, I returned to the house that had once been my home with Richard. I opened the bedroom drawer and pulled out a thick envelope. I had printed all the evidence. Photos of Richard and Ashley leaving the law office, photos of them entering the hotel, photos of them on the balcony, and every single frame from the video. I organized them carefully, slipped them into the envelope, and hid it deep in the drawer beneath old family pictures. I looked at one photo of the four of us, me, Richard, David, and Ashley, at David's birthday party years ago. Ashley was beaming, hugging David tightly, while Richard stood next to me, his arm around my shoulders with pride. Now, looking at that picture, I only wanted to tear it apart. The next morning, before dawn, I heard the front door open quietly. Richard stumbled in, reeking of alcohol. His voice was hoarse, his eyes bloodshot as if he hadn't slept. "The client was tough, Jennifer. I had to drink a lot. I'm exhausted." I stood in the kitchen, holding a glass of water, watching him perform, while inside it felt like salt on an open wound. "Calmly," I said, "go rest. You have work tomorrow." He nodded, patted my shoulder as if nothing was wrong, and headed upstairs. Minutes later, his snores filled the house again, as if he had never cheated, never gone to a hotel with our own daughter-in-law. Once I was sure Richard was asleep, my phone buzzed. It was Peterson, the private investigator. His voice was low, almost like he feared being overheard. "Mrs. Jennifer, I recorded their conversation in the hotel parking lot. I used specialized equipment. They have no idea. I'll send it right now." My heart pounded, but I simply answered, "Thank you, Peterson. Send me the audio file." Minutes later, a file arrived in my messages. I put on my headphones, sat at the table, and pressed play. Ashley's voice came first, cold and ambitious. "Dad, push the fake contract through. I want the whole bakery chain. I want to kick that old woman out of the house." It felt like a knife straight to my chest. I gripped the phone as Richard's deep, confident voice followed. "Jennifer doesn't suspect a thing. I'll handle it. She trusts me completely." Another stab to my heart. They weren't just betraying me, they were planning to steal everything I had built. The bakery chain, all the sweat, the tears, the countless sleepless nights by the ovens, the long days delivering across the city to keep our reputation alive. It was all mine. Richard had never once touched the ovens, never stood behind the counter, never signed a single hotel contract. And now, he and Ashley wanted to take it all. Throw me out of the home I had turned into a sanctuary. I nearly broke down, but I kept enough composure to copy the audio file onto the USB drive where I stored the other evidence. I carefully logged the time and location, clinging to these details as if they were anchors in a storm. The next morning, while brewing coffee at the bakery, my phone buzzed again. Peterson had sent another batch of photos taken with a telephoto lens. In them, Richard and Ashley were sitting in the car, a thick file in front of them. Ashley held a red pen, marking documents intently. Richard sat beside her, nodding and smiling in agreement. Peterson's message read, "I overheard something. Looks like they plan to use a contact at the notary office to process the transfer. I'll dig deeper." I zoomed in on the papers. Though I couldn't make out the words, I knew. These weren't ordinary business forms. They were plotting to steal every piece of my hard work. I sat there, surrounded by the sweet smell of pastries, yet the world felt like it was crumbling. I replayed the recording, listened closely to every word. That old hag, that's how Ashley referred to me. I remembered when she first joined the family, when I taught her how to cook rice, when I held her like a daughter, thinking she and David would build a future together. And Richard, the man I had loved since I was a young girl in Boston, the man who swore to stay by my side for life, they had turned me into a joke, a blind fool still believing in love and family. Just then, a regular customer, Mrs. Clara, came in. She often bought pastries for her grandchildren. "Jennifer, your bakery is packed these days. Your chain is really growing. I'm proud of you," she said warmly. I forced a smile and replied, "Thank you. I do what I can." But inside I was in chaos. I wondered what she would think if she knew the truth. Would she still see me as strong, or just a fool betrayed by her husband and daughter-in-law? I packed her pastries, saw her out the door, then collapsed into a chair, burying my face in my hands. I wanted to cry, but no tears came. Instead, a quiet anger burned within me, like the steady heat of an oven, waiting to erupt. That night I sat across from Richard in our small kitchen, the yellow light casting strange shadows on his face. He ate and spoke in a flat voice. "Jennifer, this week I have some important company documents to sign. I might need you to look them over." I held a piece of bread, pretending to chew, but Ashley's recorded words echoed in my head. "Dad, push the fake contract through." I knew he was testing me. He wanted to drag me into their filthy scheme. I gave a dry smile and said, "All right, I'll check later. I'm tired now." He nodded, drank more wine, his face flushing as his words slurred like a drunk. I nodded as if listening, though inside I wanted to scream. "Do you think I'm that stupid?" When he staggered upstairs, I cleared the table, each movement slow and deliberate, controlling the fury boiling inside. He tossed his car keys onto the nightstand, the metal glinting in the dim light. I stared at them, my heartbeat quickening. This was my chance. I crept upstairs, careful not to make a sound. Every step was a step between pain and resolve. I gripped the keys and went straight to the garage. The night was quiet, only insects buzzing outside. I turned on my phone's flashlight, its faint glow falling on Richard's old car. I opened the door. The smell of gasoline lingered, mixed with an unfamiliar perfume. I opened the glove compartment. The tube was still there, cap loose, residue dried around the rim. I held it in my hand, disgusted, like clutching a filthy secret. Clearly they were still using it, proof that Richard and Ashley were continuing their sordid affair. I carried the tube into the kitchen, set it on the table, and scrubbed my hands with lemon soap. I scrubbed hard, as if I could wash away the betrayal I had just touched. The fresh scent didn't calm my rage, but it steadied me. I opened the toolbox and pulled out a tube of clear industrial glue, the same kind I once used to fix a chair in the bakery back in Boston. Carefully, I opened the lubricant tube, squeezed in drop after drop of glue until it was full. I cleaned the tip, shook it gently so the glue blended smoothly, then tested a little. It flowed just like the original gel. No one would ever notice the difference. I smiled faintly, though inside my emotions raged like a storm. This was no joke. It was the first step toward justice. I put the tube back in the glove compartment, adjusted the mats and seats exactly as before, and shut the car door. I opened the trunk to check just a few crumpled plastic bags, an empty water bottle, and an unused condom rolling in the corner. My chest tightened, but I wasn't surprised anymore. I snapped photos, adding them to my growing folder of evidence. Each image was another piece of the puzzle, reminding me I couldn't let Richard and Ashley keep deceiving us. Back inside, I set the keys next to Richard's alarm clock. I picked up an old book, sat on the living room sofa, and pretended to read. The dim light fell across the pages, but I couldn't focus on a single word. My mind spun. I thought about David, my son, still innocent enough to believe in his happiness with Ashley, never knowing the truth. How could I ever tell him that his wife and his father were betraying us both? I thought about the bakery chain, 40 years of relentless work, all the arguments with Richard just to protect my dream. He had never truly understood, but I believed he supported me. Now I knew he had only been waiting for a chance to take it all. An hour later, Richard shuffled into the kitchen, bleary-eyed, looking for water. He spotted the keys on the table and thought nothing of it. "You're still up, Jennifer?" he mumbled. I smiled faintly. "Just reading a little. Drink your water and go back to bed." He nodded, finished his glass, and trudged upstairs, soon snoring again. I watched him like a stranger. The man who once promised to stand by me forever now plotted to destroy everything I loved. But he had no idea I had already begun to fight back. At the break of dawn, I was already awake. Weak sunlight seeped through the bakery windows. I stood in the familiar kitchen, kneading dough, preparing flan and pastries for a big hotel order. I pressed the dough hard, pouring my rage into each movement. When I returned for breakfast, I kept my face calm. Richard was already there, sipping his black coffee. I set eggs and toast on the table and said gently, "Richard, tomorrow I have to go to New York to sign a contract with a new partner. I'll probably be late. Can you handle dinner?" I glanced at him. He looked up, surprised, but in his eyes I saw not worry but relief. "A big contract?" he asked, holding my hand with fake sweetness. "Don't worry, go ahead. I'll take care of things." But the spark in his eyes, the faint smile of someone suddenly unburdened, pierced me. I wanted me gone, and I knew exactly why. I forced a smile. "Thanks. If I'm late, I'll call." He sipped his coffee, then stood, saying he had to get to the office early. As he walked out, I noticed he had left his phone on the table. The screen lit up with a missed call. The name read, A.T. My stomach dropped. Ashley Thompson. I was certain. Before I could touch it, Richard hurried back, snatched the phone, and quickly turned off the screen right in front of me. "Forgot it," he muttered with an awkward smile, then left again. I stared at the closing door, feeling slapped in the face. He wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. That day, I moved like a machine, delivering pastries, signing invoices, smiling at customers. But my mind circled endlessly around Richard and Ashley. I couldn't let them keep this charade going. Behind my back, behind David's back, I needed more evidence. To hear it from their own mouths when they thought no one was listening. That evening, I pretended to be tired, went to bed early, and said, "I need to wake up early to catch the bus tomorrow, so I'll sleep now." He nodded, patted my shoulder. "Rest, Jennifer. Travel safe." I lay still, eyes closed, listening to every sound in the house. Near midnight, Richard's snores stopped. I heard him quietly get out of bed. A faint glow from his phone lit the dark. He slipped out, thinking I was asleep. My heart pounded, but I rose silently and followed. Hiding behind the thick curtains in the living room, I saw him standing near the window in the shadows, phone pressed to his ear. "Perfect. Come to the house tomorrow. No need for the hotel." Jennifer has to sign a contract, won't be back until late. I heard soft laughter from the other end, Ashley's sweet voice. That's wonderful, Dad. Finally we can relax. Richard chuckled. Yeah, come early. I'll be waiting. Blood boiled in my veins. They weren't just cheating, they were planning to turn my home, my sanctuary with my son, into their filthy hideout. Quietly I returned to the bedroom, opened a drawer, and pulled out David's old recorder, a gift I once bought him in college. I put in fresh batteries, switched it to continuous record, and hid it behind the bookshelf, near the bed, making sure it would capture everything. I concealed the wires behind a family photo, the four of us at David and Ashley's wedding. Staring at it, bitterness filled my throat. Before slipping back into bed, I tested the recorder, adjusted the frame to hide it completely, then lay down pretending to sleep. Richard returned, collapsed beside me, and snored again as if nothing was wrong. I opened my eyes in the darkness, more alert than ever. I reached over, set the alarm earlier than usual. I closed my eyes not to sleep but to prepare. I woke at 5 a.m., the sky still dark. Only the streetlights shone through the window. The house was silent, except for Richard's steady snores upstairs. I stood in the kitchen, holding a cold cup of coffee, eyes fixed on the skillet of oil already waiting on the stove. This was the final step of the plan. A simple smoke trap, just enough to expose the truth. I tied a thin thread to the stove lighter, stretched it to the window, and attached it to a heavy object, an old coffee can. One pull from a distance and the flame would hit the oil, sending thick black smoke into the air, startling the neighbors. I cracked open the kitchen window so the smoke could escape. I tested it once. The smoke rose quickly, swirling like a warning. I turned it off immediately, checking carefully to leave no trace. I put on my coat, grabbed a large bag, and pretended to leave. Before going, I stepped into the bedroom and shook Richard gently. I have to get to the bus station now. I'm signing a contract. I'll be back tonight. He opened his sleepy eyes and muttered, All right. Be careful, Jennifer. Call me if you need anything. Then he buried his face in the pillow and went back to sleep. I looked at him, the man I once loved and trusted. Now lying there, unaware of the trap waiting, I turned away, my heart heavy but my steps steady. Instead of going to the bus station, I went across the street to Mrs. Clara's, my closest neighbor. She opened the door, saw me clutching the bag, and asked worriedly, Jennifer, why are you up so early? Is something wrong? I forced a smile. Clara, may I stay here for a few hours? I need to watch my house. She frowned but didn't press further, handed me a hot cup of coffee, and pulled a chair to the window. From there I could see the front door where Richard and Ashley would walk in, where the truth would be revealed. Around 10 a.m. A taxi stopped in front of the house. Ashley stepped out, wearing a light floral dress and dark glasses, as if afraid of being recognized. Richard opened the door, looked around, then hurried her inside. My grip on the coffee tightened, my heart pounding. It's time, I whispered, opening the app connected to the recorder hidden upstairs. The sound came through my headphones. Ashley's laughter, glasses clinking, heavy footsteps, and Richard's deep voice. Now we can relax. No need to hide in hotels. Ashley laughed. You sure know how to pick the right moment. That old woman's gone, isn't she? I bit my lip, swallowing my fury at her scornful tone. Then the bed began to creak with sounds I didn't want to hear. I shut my eyes, breathing deeply, telling myself, just a little longer, Jennifer, a little longer. Minutes later, Ashley screamed, What the hell? We're stuck! Her voice panicked, nearly crying, Richard barked, "Shut up, let me check." I smiled. With a single tap on my phone, I triggered the smoke trap. The thread yanked, the stove sparked, and the pan of oil ignited. Thick black smoke poured from the kitchen window, rising high like a signal. Clara gasped, "Jennifer, your house is on fire!" I pretended to panic, but inside I was calm. Neighbors rushed out, shouting, "Jennifer's house is burning! Call the fire department!" "Mr." Harold nearby quickly dialed the city fire station. I sat still, clutching my coffee, eyes fixed on the house. Everything was going as planned. In my headphones, Ashley's voice grew desperate. "Richard, do something! I can't move!" His growl followed. "Stop screaming! I'm trying!" But I knew they couldn't do a thing. That tube I had filled with industrial glue was doing its job, trapping them in their most shameful moment. I pictured them struggling, panicking, and part of me felt relieved. Not because I was cruel, but because they had pushed me here. They wanted to steal the bakery, the family, my dignity. Now they would pay. I glanced at the window, the smoke thick, neighbors gathering, shouting in alarm. "What's happening? Where's Jennifer?" someone asked. "She went on a business trip. That's what I heard," another replied. Clara gave me a look full of suspicion but said nothing, only squeezed my hand. She sensed something, but I didn't need to explain. The truth was about to erupt, and I was ready. Only 10 minutes later, sirens wailed at the end of the street. A red truck screeched to a halt in front of my house. I saw David leap from the driver's seat in his fire captain's uniform, his face tense. My son shouted firmly, "Gear up! Move fast! There may be people trapped inside." My heart ached. The son who once took pride in his family and his parents was now about to face the cruelest truth. I wanted to run to him, to whisper, "Forgive me, David," but I had no other path left. I stood still, letting it unfold. The smoke billowed from the kitchen, convincing David and his team there was a serious fire. He swung his axe at the front door, wood splintering under the blows. His team followed with hoses and extinguishers. I heard the chaos. From the bedroom, the desperate shouts of Richard mixed with Ashley's sobs. "Do something, Richard! I can't take it anymore!" His growl, "Shut up! Stop screaming!" I bit my lip, clutching my phone where the hidden mic still streamed their voices. They were trapped, helpless, just as I had planned. David reached the bedroom. I could imagine what he saw. His own father and his wife, naked, stuck together, faces pale with pain and panic. I wasn't there, but through the headphones, I heard David's stunned, trembling voice. "What? What is this?" A firefighter behind him gasped, "Dear God!" Another couldn't help a nervous laugh. David roared instantly, "Silence!" I knew it wasn't just to keep order, it was his last desperate attempt to shield his own heart. But the disgrace was exposed, not just to David, but to his crew and the entire neighborhood. A firefighter reported, "Captain, the fire's under control. Just a grease flare-up, nothing major." David didn't answer. He was likely still frozen by what he had seen. Neighbors gathered at the front, crowding, whispering. "What's going on? That's Richard and the daughter-in-law," a woman shouted in shock. "Oh my God, how could they?" another exclaimed. Clara stood beside me, quietly filming Richard and Ashley writhing on the bed, faces twisted in pain. She looked at me with pity and anger. "Jennifer, you knew, didn't you?" I didn't answer, only nodded slightly, my eyes fixed on the window. David came down the stairs, his boots striking the floor hard. Through my headphones, Richard's hoarse voice barked, "Get them all out! "Close the door, David." But it was too late. The whole neighborhood had gathered, their scornful eyes and whispers forming a chorus of humiliation. Father-in-law and daughter-in-law caught red-handed. "Unbelievable!" a man exclaimed. "Poor Jennifer. How could it come to this?" another sighed. The firefighters, embarrassed but forced to act, wrapped the bedsheet around Richard and Ashley, trying to cover their exposed bodies, then carried them onto stretchers. Ashley sobbed, "Please, help me. I can't bear it." Richard muttered weakly, "Don't let anyone see." But everyone had already seen. Disgusted stares, mocking laughs, heads shaking in shame. They were taken away, wrapped in thin sheets, as the crowd grew louder. Shameless. Father-in-law and daughter-in-law. Filthy. People hissed as the ambulance pulled away, sirens wailing, laughter mixed with shouts. What a disgraceful show. "Harold," the loud neighbor, bellowed, "can't believe the world has two such shameless people." An elderly woman shook her head, whispering to her companion, "Poor Jennifer." I stood among the crowd, pretending to be shocked, as if I had just rushed back from the bus station. David stood frozen in the yard, arms hanging limp, face pale as death. His crew avoided his eyes, quietly packing their gear. I knew David wasn't just stunned by the sight of his father and wife stuck together, but by the double betrayal of the two people he loved most. I longed to hold him, to say I was sorry he had to witness it, but I restrained myself, following Clara quietly to the hospital. We sat in the hallway on the 3rd floor, waiting. I wore the worried look of a wife hearing her home had caught fire. Hours later, a doctor emerged, sweat on his brow. He looked at me and said softly, "Mrs. Jennifer, we managed to separate them. Fortunately, no serious damage, just minor skin irritation. Ointment will be enough." I nodded, feigning relief, while my hand brushed the purse where I had hidden 2 tubes of mustard I'd prepared. "Thank you, doctor," I said, voice trembling to mask my intent. "May I see them?" He nodded and led me to the nurse's desk. They handed me 2 tubes of ointment. The young nurse looked at me with sympathy. "Ma'am, this must be very hard for you." "I'm so sorry." I gave a weak smile. As soon as she turned her back, I swiftly swapped the ointment for the 2 mustard tubes. My movements were quick, practiced, as if I'd rehearsed them 100 times. I entered the hospital room with a tube of mustard in my hand, pretending concern. "Richard, Ashley, are you all right?" Ashley lay on the bed, hair tangled, eyes red, unable to meet mine. Richard, still pale, stammered, "Jennifer, I can explain." But I didn't let him finish. I placed the mustard tube on the bedside table and turned away. Minutes later, screams erupted. Ashley clutched her face, crying, "It burns my skin." Richard writhed, cursing, "What the hell? Who did this?" The hallway descended into chaos. Patients and families rushed to see. One woman whispered to her son, "That's the pair from the video this morning. Father-in-law and daughter-in-law. Disgraceful." Another added, "Serves them right." Doctors rushed in, ordering nurses to wash their skin and apply neutralizers. But the humiliation of Richard and Ashley was already public, unstoppable. Clara's video of them being carried out on stretchers had spread through the neighborhood and onto the internet. I sat outside listening to the whispers, feeling as though the whole world was watching their downfall. When the crowd thinned, David entered the hospital room, holding a thick folder. I had called him as soon as the ambulance left, instructing him to bring the envelope of evidence from the drawer and the 2 divorce petitions I had prepared. He handed me the file, his eyes hollow, silent. I opened it, laid the papers on the table before Richard and Ashley. I looked Richard straight in the eye, my voice cold but steady. 40 years of marriage ends here. Sign. After that, do whatever you want, but stay out of our lives. Ashley broke down, turned to David. Please, forgive me. I was wrong. I beg you. But David only looked at her with stone-cold eyes, then turned his back and walked out without a word. Richard tried to grab my hand, his voice trembling. Jennifer, listen. I didn't want this. I pulled away, cutting him off. Enough, Richard. This path was yours to choose. He screamed in despair. Jennifer, please, Richard begged, but a nurse stepped in, reminding, keep your voice down. This is a hospital. I turned away, not looking back. In the hallway, I saw David leaning against the wall, his head in his hands. I walked to him, placed my hand on his shoulder, but he didn't lift his face. Mom, he whispered, voice breaking. Why did it have to be Dad? Why her? I didn't answer. I just held him tightly, sharing his pain, as if it were my own. In that moment, I knew Richard and Ashley had lost everything. Their honor, their marriage, even their filthy scheme. But David and I had lost a family. I only hoped that, in time, we would find peace. Weeks after the scandal, my bakery was busier than ever. The bell over the door never stopped ringing. Customers came and went with smiles and compliments. Jennifer, you are so strong, Mrs. Martha said, holding a bag of freshly baked flan. The whole neighborhood is proud of you, of how you defended your family business amid all that filth. I smiled, thanked her. People supported me. They called me strong, but only I knew that strength came from the shattered pieces of my heart. Every time I looked at the oven where I had poured 40 years of sweat and tears, I remembered Richard and Ashley, who had tried to take everything but failed. And I was still here with my bakery, with David, and with a new life. After that day, David moved in with me. He didn't talk much about what had happened, but I noticed the change. He was no longer the cheerful David who laughed easily. His eyes were deeper now, carrying a wound that would never heal. Mom, I want to stay here for a while, he said that first night, pulling his Neverly suitcase inside. I'll help you run the bakery, talk to the customers. Whatever you need, I'll do. I hugged him, felt his warmth, and simply nodded without asking anything. I knew David needed time, and so did I. Every morning we opened the bakery together. I handled the ovens, arranged the trays of pastries, while David checked invoices and called hotels and restaurants. Mom, Riverside Hotel wants to increase their pastry order for next week, he called from the counter, his voice calm but missing the light it once had. I answered, All right, confirm it. I'll prepare more flour. Those simple moments gave me a peace I hadn't felt in a long time. No more Richard's deceitful eyes, no more Ashley's fake sweet voice. It was just David and me holding on to what was left. Dinner was only the two of us now, sitting across from each other in the small kitchen, eating simple meals. Sometimes beans and chicken with rice, sometimes just bread with coffee. Mom, can you make flan for me this weekend? He asked one night, a faint smile on his lips. The first smile I had seen since the scandal. Of course, I replied, my heart lightening. But you'll have to help me with the caramel. He nodded. In that moment, I felt like we were slowly healing. I began to spend time on myself, something I had rarely done in 40 years. I joined a cooking club at the community center where women my age shared recipes and stories. Jennifer, your flan is the best in the neighborhood. One woman laughed when I brought a tray. I smiled and said, "That's a secret I learned when I was young." I also started attending church on weekends. Sitting quietly under the light streaming through stained glass, I prayed. Not for Richard or Ashley, but for David, for myself, to find the strength to move forward. Sometimes I walked with Clara around the park, listening to her talk about the neighborhood. "Jennifer, you know," she said, eyes glistening, "people still mention Richard and Ashley, but they say you're the real winner." I only smiled without answering. Winner? Maybe. But the price was an entire family. David began to change too. He grew less quiet, started telling me about his firefighting work. "Yesterday we put out a blaze at the market," he said over dinner. "It was dangerous, Mom. But luckily, no one was hurt." I listened, my heart swelling with pride. "You have to take care of yourself. Now you're all I have," I said, my voice trembling. David looked at me tenderly. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll never let you be alone." Those words healed me. They made me believe that, even after losing so much, I still had my son. One afternoon when the bakery was packed, I sat at the counter, watching the flow of people on the street. The bell rang constantly, the air filled with the scent of pastries. I looked at the trays of flan and cakes and thought about the road I had traveled. I had built this bakery with my own 2 hands, from a young girl to a woman who learned to be strong. Richard and Ashley had tried to take it all, but they failed. I kept the bakery, I kept David, and most importantly, I kept myself. Looking back, I realized some wounds in a family will never fully heal. I had lost a husband and a daughter-in-law, but I had also found peace for myself and my son. I understood that love and trust, if placed in the wrong hands, could turn into a blade cutting deep into the heart. At the same time, that betrayal reminded me that the true value of family lies in honesty, respect, and sharing. We can't always choose what happens in life, but we can choose how we face it. I chose to hold on to what remained, to nurture love with my son, and to live with pride in what I built with my own hands. And what about you? If you were in my place, would you stay silent to keep the peace, or bravely expose the truth to reclaim your voice? Share your thoughts, because maybe our story today will be the light for someone out there. And if you'd like to keep listening, to learn together from these everyday lessons, don't forget to follow so you won't miss the next story.